Hey, what's going on, Michaelene? Thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show. We're super excited to get into it. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. And we gotta say, congrats on your Californian wedding day. Best
Yes,
invitation
congratulations.
designer.
Thank you so much. It was such an exciting night, and I was so nervous for that award show, but I was floored when I got it. So I was really, really excited for it. So thank you.
Yeah, I bet. I bet that was exciting. Was everyone like screaming and cheering? And we've never been, so
I know. Every year we say we'll go next year. We need to go next year.
Yeah, it's always super loud, and I always find myself like when I hear somebody else's name for any category, I'm like clapping because like I feel like I understand what that feels like. And then when
Uh-huh.
I won, I just was like, ah. Like,
Uh-huh.
I was so quiet. I was like, ding it.
Oh,
that's so crazy. Well, congrats on that. Well
Thank
deserved.
you.
All right, so before we get into the nitty gritty about who you are and what you do, can you just like let everyone know like who you are, what you do, and what your favorite drink is?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. So my name is Michaelene. I am from California. I'm born and raised here in a little tiny small town called Cherry Valley. But I went to school for graphic design and marketing, and my finished like my senior project was come up with a business idea of something that you love to do. At the time, all my friends were getting married or engaged, and my sister started wedding planning, and I thought, oh, this would be so fun to like make wedding invitations for people. I think I can do this. And I convinced a girl that I've never met to let me do her wedding invites. I had no prior experience, and she trusted me. And it really was like the start of it all. And that was 13 years ago. And it's funny because I still stay in touch with her and
oh,
watching her family grow over the years. And it's been a lot of fun, but it never stopped. I just kept doing more invitations. I started helping people plan their weddings. I started finding myself in all the different roles and when it comes to wedding planning. And yeah, so 13 years later, here I am making invites and coloring and helping people get married. It's like a dream come true,
Yeah,
honestly.
we love it. And then, what is your favorite drink?
Oh, my favorite drink? I'd say like rum and coke. I feel like I'm slightly a pirate.
Yeah, that is
nice.
less. That's a tough drink right there. I like
It's
that.
like, I don't know, never really got into tequila. The margaritas never were my thing. And then I know a lot of people find whiskey great, but I was like, I might be a little islander.
Love
Awesome.
it.
So your sister is in the wedding industry too. How fun. Do you guys get to do a lot of weddings together?
Actually, my sister, she had a little venue. She was doing
Oh,
that
wow.
for a
Uh-huh.
while and like a little micro venue, and it was so much fun to work together and coordinate together and basically do what we do, which is just like have fun and party with people.
Yeah.
But she just had her fourth baby, and
Oh, wow.
so she's like, I'm gonna slow down a little bit. So she still helps me with my jobs and like my clients and projects, but she's officially out of the wedding industry for a while.
Yeah, four kids. That's a lot to juggle. I don't know.
Poor
Maybe we'll
girl.
do it. Well, let's get into a little bit of what you do. So, how do you help couples reflect their personal, unique style and personalities in their wedding invitations?
Yeah, I it really stems from my experience when I was getting married. I was married. I've been married twice. So my first wedding was a very much of a learning experience that I was going through that I find a lot of girls or couples go through when they're in their 20s, right? They're excited about the wedding industry. And what I found when I was going through it, there was a lot of like in the box thinking, a lot of cookie cutter,
Uh-huh.
like this is just a checklist and just go down the list and you'll have the best day ever. And when I ended up getting to the end of my wedding planning process and the wedding came, I just didn't feel seen or I didn't feel heard. And I just felt like I was just like a cake, like a bride on the top of a cake kind of idea. And I just thought, I don't want anybody to ever feel this way. So when I got the chance to do it over again, and I started helping couples get married. I just always had that in my brain. Like I've always had that in the back of my head. Like I don't really care what you want to do for your wedding. I just want it to be what you actually want. So
Mm,
if
Yeah.
you feel like you just need to follow the trends or you're just doing it because some celebrity did it, you're going to regret the decision. And
mm,
like if you want to have a sports themed wedding, which is not my jam, but like if that is what brought you guys together, let's do it and like let's go full out and have a great time, but like not worry about um, you know, following what like the wedding magazines or like what the, Pinterest is saying.
What you think you're supposed to do. Yeah. And
Yes.
you
Yes.
should, I 100% agree. You should step into your wedding weekend and your guests know that they're at your wedding. So I
Yeah.
love that as
Yeah,
a stationer.
especially with the invitations. I always
Yeah.
think like a lot of people are always saying, "Oh, like your love story begins like when the wedding's over," and it really doesn't. Like I think the story actually starts with your wedding invitation, and it's sort of your guest first glimpse into what they can expect for the day. So
Uh-huh.
my goal is always like as my couples guests are opening up their invite, I want them to be like, oh yeah, this is going to be totally them. Like this is their wedding. This invite could not have come from anybody else. And like that's kind of where that's like where I design from. That's my design process. That's how it all starts.
I love it. So bringing the invitations in as a part of the experience for their guests. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, so Michaelene, how did you come up with the name Queen Bee's Graphic Design?
It's, I feel like it's a funny story that I feel like it's funny only to me.
Yeah.
Let's
But
hear it.
so my maiden name started with a B.
Mm.
And in our little tiny town, like winning homecoming was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I won homecoming, so I was like Queen Bee.
Oh, there you go.
The name just sort of stuck, and that was it. And when I was thinking, the name actually came from that science project or the senior project my college year, and everybody, was using their names like in their business. And I thought,
Hmm.
my name is so hard to spell and it's so strange, it's so unique that if I use my name as part of my business, nobody's going to Google me. Like they're going to be like, what was that girl's name? So I had to try
Yeah.
to come up with something that was a little bit easier to find, and then just Queen Bee stuck. And so that's where the name came from.
Hey, that's awesome. I
Yeah,
like
super
it.
cool.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, I'm sure you've done so many invitations over the years. What's the most creative or unique invitation that comes to mind?
Hmm. I had okay, so I submitted a photo to the magazine, California Wedding Day. They were asking for a specific design that was inspired by the mountains and just they're
Oh.
like open-ended go. And so I was really inspired by the idea of a love story. And so I
Mm.
created an invitation that looked exactly like maybe like a love letter. So it didn't feel so much like an invitation. It was all the same font. It was all written like handwritten. It was just on really like raw paper, and I just wanted it to feel soft and like romantic.
Oh,
And from that design, I ended up booking a client, and she was like, I love this. I want to make it a little bit different so it fits my wedding, but like this was it. And that ended up being one of my favorite designs. I think because it felt so connected to storytelling, which I
Mm.
think is one of my favorite things to do. And so when the whole idea of her like getting married in this like old estate, and it was like the love of her life, and it just felt really romantic. And I feel like I'm such like a sap when it comes to weddings anyways. So when someone's like, let's play up the love story, I'm all for it. So that might have been my favorite. And we use the wax seals and the dried flowers and the
uh-huh.
and so like source stamps, and so we went all out and it was a lot of fun. It was fun to see that whole design come together.
It sounds beautiful. I gotta see it after this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you are definitely in the right industry if love stories is your jam.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So funny, right?
Yeah. So speaking of that, I want to get into like, so what trends are you currently seeing in wedding invitations? And like, how do you keep your designs fresh and modern while staying true to the couple's individuality?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things I feel like almost like a I don't want to like say that I'm a fashion designer because I'm not, but like
Sure.
a fashion designer has to think so far into the future because as
Mm,
they pick the trends and then or the trends are set, however the fashion world does it.
yeah.
And then they have to create the pieces and the pieces have to be made and then by the time they're in style they have to be in the store. So I
Hmm.
feel like that's sort of where my brain is too all of the time. I'm constantly thinking what would be great in the future because invitations happen so far in advance to a wedding. And then
Hmm.
the design process, we're looking like a year out from when anything ever materializes.
Yeah.
So the I find like if we're in winter now, like I'm starting to look at summer trends that I think are going to be big next year. And so I kind of pick up on things like I think pearls are going to be really big next year, which I love, which is
Hmm.
like a really romantic thing versus diamonds. And like people are really embracing bows in their designs. And so when I look at that, I find when a couple comes to me and I just say, tell me about you guys. I want to hear your story. And so they'll tell me pieces or like, for example, I had a couple who was like, oh, yeah, we were really connected to the beach. We really love this coastal, but we don't want to be cheesy. We don't want anything like that. So this idea of like, okay, and then like my brain starts going like big, like, okay, like what if we do wedding invitations where it's got um, like the shell inside of the design, and then we're
Oh,
like
wow.
we incorporate a pearl in that way. So like even though pearls are like big and you're maybe most of the time you think like a string of pearls, like how can we add like what's trending but like still make it connected to your story? And like so I think it all happens with give me as much information as you can and then like let me piece together the way I think that it will look great. And then of course they have to approve it, but they usually do because I think I am trying to tailor it to them. So
Wow.
This is what I love. This is what I love about asking certain questions because then we could hear like the passion and stuff just fly
Yeah.
off the person.
And it
Talking about
sounds like such a fun process. And it kind of leads into my next question.
Mhm.
How do you approach the whole process for couples? Like, as they approach you, I'm sure that they don't know where to start. So, how do you guide them through the invitation design process?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So I always hope to the wedding gods that I find a couple when they're ready for their save the dates so that I can
Yeah.
walk them through everything. And I usually it happens sometimes, but most of the time it's just for invitations. But it really starts with I think a common question in the wedding industry, they just go, what's your price, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a very common, like, oh, you do photos, what's your price? And
Yep.
then before I tell them, and I'm very honest and transparent, like before I can give you a price, I need to know what you want. And then
Hmm.
that stems from let's open a conversation about what is usually included in the invitation. Does this sound like something you want? Are you, very demure? Are you trying to go like very spicy? Are you trying to do something showstopper? Like, and
Mm.
I just have to ask these questions that really are just yes or no, sort of tailors down what's possible. And then they can see like, oh, this is a lot more involved than just like a piece of paper, or this is a lot more like she needs a lot more information. We need to do our homework and then we can understand what we're looking for. And I always send them samples and ideas like, oh, what theme are you thinking or what vibe are you going for? And then I'll send them something and it's easier sometimes for couples to tell me that they don't like we don't want something big. We don't want something full. We don't want a big old pack. Okay, great. Like, let's size it down. And
Hmm.
then sort of just kind of filter through. And then by the time the design of the invitation ever even comes in, like, we already know what pieces we're having. We already know how many people are invited, if they're going global, if they're local. Like, we all have all these questions already answered. And then the design part is just like the fun part of the
Yeah.
invitation.
That's so cool. So are your designs all custom, or do you have stuff that's like pre-made and like, oh, here you guys go if you just want something?
I have, I would say 98% of my invitations are custom, or they
Mm,
come from somebody, like they saw somebody else's on my website and they're like, we love this, but like we want to change it a little bit, which
mm,
is fine. Like that, I've yet to do the same exact invite twice in
yeah.
13 years. Like
Oh,
everybody,
wow.
I've never
Nice.
just been like, oh, well, let's just change the names and call it a day. It's like
Uh-huh.
everybody is so different that it only makes sense that their invitations would be different. But I do have a couple that I call my ready to order. So I've pre-designed some like maybe 8 or 9 different sets. And then I'm like, then you can pick and choose like because I find even though I like to tailor the design to the couple, I also understand that some couples don't take a year, 2 years to plan their wedding. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's really short. And so to cut down on that time and still have beautifully made invitations, I'm gonna go, let's pick from this bunch and then we can tailor it to fit you, but we're not starting from like ground zero.
Right.
That is crazy. So I can imagine how stressful or how much you guys have to do when it comes to the invitation suite. So let's get into reducing stress in the stationary planning process. So, Michaelene, are there any common mistakes or pitfalls you've seen couples encounter during the invitation, design process, and how can you avoid them?
Yeah, I think the biggest pitfall is not being clear on who's invited. That is the number one. And that's like something that like I'm very upfront about when we're designing because they
Yeah.
go, sometimes couples will be like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I'm like, but is it? Because there's a venue with a head count and there's a caterer that needs a head count and there's
Yeah.
Yes.
rentals and there's all these things. So if you leave it open-ended, do you know your crowd well enough to know that they're going to respect the fact that they're not bringing 8 children with them when the invitation was meant for two? And
Yeah.
maybe coming from an Italian Mexican family, like I understand that large family
Yeah.
mentality, but it's
Hmm.
real when wedding invitations are clearly stated or it's not the directions aren't clear. So I tell the couple sometimes that your invitations are like instructions. It's your instruction manual for your guest. How do you show
Mm,
up? When do you show up? And who's allowed to come and what you should bring and what you should not bring. Are you mindful of your shoes? Like these are instructions. So if you're
mhm.
not clear and you're trying to like IKEA,
Yeah.
instruction and there's little diagrams, but like you're not quite sure what to do. Like I think that that leads to stress because that leads to questions on the back end that they're calling or getting phone calls. And then like, how awkward is that phone call of like, oh, can I bring my, 11-year-old daughter? And you're like, oh, sorry, it was really just for adults. Well, she's well behaved. Well, okay, great. I'm so proud, but also this is just for adults. Well, she's going to come instead of like, so
Oh,
these
wow.
questions, they
Yes.
come and it starts to like snowball. And I'm like, if we want to cut out the stress, let's just be very clear on who's invited from the very beginning. So I try to
Mhm.
like be really clear about that because I know how stressful that is.
Yes, there's always
Oh,
so many questions when it comes to at least as far from guest standpoint, like you
Yeah.
said, are children allowed? Who gets a plus one? So having clear communication for your guests,
yeah.
total game changer. So it's really, really nice to hear that, you're there to support them and,
Mhm.
tell them these things.
Yeah. And I didn't think that it was, I honestly didn't think that it was that I would say big of a mystery. I feel like sometimes when you're in your industry, you're around something
Yeah.
enough to be like, oh, this is super common. So I remember I made a reel about this and the reel went crazy. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
it went like 5 million views, crazy. And I got like
Dang.
3,000 responses of people very heated about if kids were allowed to come or if they weren't, or what that
Oh,
meant.
wow.
What was the cutoff age? And so I started to see like, oh, there's a real misunderstanding about what that little line that we're all used to, like adults only. Like, what does that actually mean? And people were arguing in the comment section heavily
Yeah.
about what a wedding was supposed to be and who was supposed to become and how dare you not invite kids? How dare you bring kids? Like it was so wild. And I
Wow.
thought, oh, this is something I really need to clear up for my couples so they don't encounter this.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it
Very
was pretty
interesting.
wild.
People would question, what does adults only mean? I mean, I feel like that's pretty straightforward. But
That's it. But some girl was like, so I remember very specifically this one comment. I can't remember who it was, but this girl says, well, I'm married and I'm 19, but I'm not 21 yet. Do I count as, as
oh
an adult?
god.
And I was like, oh, that is a really good question. I would say you're an adult. You're married. Okay. But you know what, if the invitation was like 21 and older, I
Yeah,
could
yeah.
see like where that mindset might come in, but I think that's just also takes into consideration that like the couple has to know their audience and they have to tailor to them. So if they have an audience, I'd say an audience, they have a guest list that they don't have a lot, like maybe they're the first of their friends to get married. Nobody has
Yeah.
kids yet, and it's all
Hmm.
adults. Like maybe that's not that big of a deal. But if you're like the last of your friends and all your friends have brand new babies
Oh
and
yeah.
some toddlers, like maybe you have to be a little bit clearer. So it's
Hmm.
just, I think, understanding your audience about, I say audience, your guest list about
That's
that.
a
Get it.
that's so wild. So I never pictured or imagined invitation designers just going through that whole thing with their clients. It's
There's
like,
all sorts of etiquettes I'm sure you have to
yeah,
educate them on throughout.
Yeah.
And another thing that I'm sure you have to kind of balance with them is timing and deadlines.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
how do you go about that? Like ensuring that clients know what their deadlines are and expectations to make sure the design process is smooth for them.
Yeah, I always love to talk to couples way far in advance versus late. Like late stresses me out because there's a lot of factors that come with like, oh, we're getting married in 2 months. And we're like,
You should be
okay, we can
mailing
do
your
it, but this is going to be
invitations.
hard. So I try to be, oh man, you should be getting RSVPs back already. So I did talk about this on Instagram, which I thought was pretty funny. I said it was like a girl math, but like wedding edition, and we're going to do math backwards. So like if your wedding is in August, and I started like counting back, like you need 30 days for your head count, and then you need 30 days for this, and you need, and then so we should be starting your invitations, on this day. So I try to like present the information in a way that's easily digestible and you're like, oh, okay, we are getting married in August in 2025. We probably should be thinking about invitations pretty soon instead of this mindset like, oh, we have time, which is, yes, you do have time. And I don't want someone to stress out and think like we have to do it all at once, but
yeah,
I think most people who are getting married, it's their first wedding they've ever planned. So, like, how would you know all the things you need to know when you've never done it before? So, I have like a timeline, like, fill out on my website that people can just like briefly look at and say, oh, okay, this is when we should be designing. This is when we should be mailing. This is when, our wedding is. So they can sort of do it that way. And I talk about it all the time, but the timelines I have to take into consideration the other parts of the wedding. Like I said, like a venue may say we need a final head count by 30 days. And
Hmm.
so I need to give the bride and groom 2 weeks to give them phone call times to people who don't RCP or like forgot to send it in or ones that got lost. And so I'm like, so then you need to have your invites out at least 2 months so that you have your guests have enough time to do whatever they need to do to find hotels or baby sitters. And if we need to have, so it's like it starts to build out and
dang.
like it can take a lot longer than most people think. When it's done, I think I'd say in a calm manner because obviously we can rush things, but I think that's when the stress levels come up because you're quickly approving things and then you're like, oh shoot, did we do this? Like you start second guessing yourself.
Hmm.
And then of course there's like rush fees and I don't like charging anybody like a rush fee, but if I have to get something printed and produced and shipped faster and I have to like cut line, like it has to
Come
pay for
from
that.
somewhere.
So
Yeah. So, in an ideal world, like how far out would you start working with a client on their invitations?
I would say 6 to 8 months
Yeah.
Hmm.
ahead of time. And that would like also depend on if it's a destination wedding. A
Mhm.
destination wedding would need a little bit more time because we need, guest list to have time to book airlines. But like I'd say 6 months for wedding invitations feels good.
Yeah, so it can be
Feels
enjoyable.
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is crazy. This is what I love hearing when we ask certain questions. Like, so when couples come to me, my photography brain goes. When couples come to Jade, her planning brain goes. And
Yeah.
it's cool to hear when couples come to you, your little invitation design brain just like ready to rock. That's so cool to hear behind
Yeah.
things. So I want to ask, so for the couples that are listening, like what
Mhm.
are some tips do you have for them to balance certain things for tight schedules and budgets?
Yeah, I'd say I think working in the wedding industry, anything is possible. So
Yeah.
like it comes with a price tag. So when couples come to me and they are on Pinterest, which I highly recommend, but I also want couples to recognize that Pinterest doesn't come with price tags.
Yeah.
So bring it as inspiration and not necessarily as like your to-do list if you have a budget that is tight. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with finding places to save and to splurge. And if invitations happen to be one of those places you want to save, that's fine. You're not going to break my heart, but I would still encourage somebody to look at invitations as the first sentence of your love story. So
Mhm.
don't go cookie cutter. Don't go,
Yeah.
to big box department store. I don't want to say anybody's names, but big
Yeah.
department store and just get like, slap your name on it and call it a day. Because it's still really an important piece of your wedding. If you needed to find budget friendly ways to do things, like there are ways I explain on my Instagram all the time. Like,
Mm.
hey, if you're trying to, I don't want to even say cut corners because I think that that implies that you have to give something up. I just think
Yeah.
that there are ways to think about things that maybe this is important to you and maybe this isn't. Okay, look, let's save on the thing that's like not as important, but I think still keeping things personalized and like making sure things are like tailored to fit your day and your story is so important. And I think that actually makes the difference between a memorable wedding or not, whether or
Yeah.
not the couple considered all the little details that relate to their story.
Hmm.
That's true. And I feel
Yes.
like I've been told that the invitations pretty much when the guests get it sets the tone
Yeah.
of the wedding.
It
It
tells them a lot
does.
of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does. Well, I've seen and I mean obviously I've been invited to weddings that I didn't do the invitation,
Yeah.
which is fine. It's not going to hurt my feelings, but when I see an invitation, um there is a moment of me like critiquing things and I don't know how to not do it.
Yeah.
So I apologize if I get an invite to anybody's wedding and I didn't do it, but I'm going to critique it because what I'm looking for is if like as you said, it sets the tone. So
Hmm.
if there's a typo or if there's a like spacing problem where like something becomes hard to read
Oh, wow.
or the invitation comes out in let's just say like it's a boho style, but you get to the details part and it's like black tie. I'm like, this doesn't
Yeah.
match. Like this doesn't make sense for what you're doing. And I think that goes back to the idea of like this becomes your instruction manual for guests. So
Hmm.
Hmm.
you want to set the right tone. If you decide you're going to have a black tie um, formal event, like you wouldn't put like all these bright colors and you wouldn't use all these crazy fonts and
Yeah.
you wouldn't it would just it had to me it should match. Like
Yeah. Big time.
I need it to make sense.
Big time.
I love that.
It
So
has to.
yeah.
So continuing that on to wedding day, do you offer services for wedding day, like wedding, like welcome signs or
Mhm.
menus and table numbers to make it cohesive? Yeah.
Yes, I love doing that. And it's funny because as this, invite designer, the wedding day is the thing I don't see. I'm
Yeah.
hardly ever a part of it. So I always pray that I get to see the photos later on. But when I get to design the day of details, like the menu card, the escort cards, the things, I can help envision what the day will look like by creating these pieces. And I always make sure that it matches with the invite and that everything
Mm-hmm.
is beautiful and everything like makes sense together. And it's never like a copy paste. So it's never like the same background but it's like I incorporate the same textures or find ways to like make the day feel a really extra special. For example, I had this one couple, they were getting married and they were like, we want it like New Orleans, but like French quarters, not like party. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So we came up with this design, this background, and she really wanted golden like tassels on everything. And she was
Cool.
like, but I don't want to do that for the invitation because I just feel like that might get lost in the mail or that might cause
Mm,
some problems with postage,
Right.
which I agree with. Having anything thick in the envelope is
yeah.
never ideal. But I said, okay, well, what if we hold off on the invites, but we use it as part of your menu design? And she was like, oh, I love that. Because then we don't have to mail them. We don't have to do anything. So it was like fun to be able to say, like, let's incorporate the things that you want in the moment that it works the best instead of thinking, oh, I can't have this. And so it's just out forever. Like, okay, well, like, how else can we incorporate this? So when I get to design multiple pieces, I can use that creative, like, flow and say like, oh, okay, look, let's do it over here instead of over here. And you get the same look, but you don't have to like pay for the extra postage to send it out. So
Dang, looking out for your couples. Hardcore. I love it. So it sounds like you got working with the couples on lock. You're a boss in that field. So when it comes to, say, working with other vendors, such as like wedding planners and florists, how do you ensure a cohesive design with the elements across like all aspects of the wedding?
I usually ask for photos of whatever they're sending their other vendors. I said,
Mm,
whatever inspiration you've sent them and whatever you've picked, whatever's on lockdown, like send it to me, and then I'll make sure that I pull from there. And then that way you're not like exactly like your flowers aren't one color and your invites are
yeah.
another, and then the
Mm-hmm.
table doesn't match. Like I want it to look good for everybody because even if it's even if as a very singular vendor, you're looking out for your piece of the wedding, when a wedding looks good, as a whole, I think the vendors kind of like pull together and you're like, yeah, look
Yeah.
what we did. It's like a team effort. And so
Yeah.
seeing it like then of course if the couple allows it and you can use those photos as part of your portfolio, course you want everything to look good and you're not
Yeah.
just looking out for your one piece. So
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is why I feel like couples should always get like a invitation designer instead of just going to like the big things because it will look so like perfect for their wedding
yeah,
day.
I mean I agree, but
Yeah.
I mean if everyone can hire me, that would be amazing. No,
Yeah.
I think it really actually stems from any wedding vendor that when you talk to them, like you said, you can feel when they're really excited to be where
Mhm.
they're at. And I just feel like I'm excited to be in weddings. So I'm looking at it as a whole. Like this is the part I play and this is the part I love, but like let's make sure your day is beautiful for you and it's like
Yeah.
you're making the memories you want. And it's not so much of like I do invites and that's it. And I'm not thinking of anything else. I don't know how else not to think about it. It's like the wedding is the whole day. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
We can feel the passion in your work.
Feel it.
Yes. What do
Feel-
you love most about getting to help your couples create custom wedding invitations?
Um, I think it's the most nerve-wracking part, but the best part is when the design essentially comes out of the computer because we start, computer, and I can materialize it. And then when
Uh-huh.
I get to send it to them, And when I get that email or that phone call back, I always get so nervous every single time I have to open it. But every time they're just like, wow, this is a lot better than I even imagined it could be. And like that is like so exciting to
Yeah.
say this idea that I had and like could put on a computer screen and like I promise it's going to be great and then materialize it and like show them what I was envisioning, what that comes
Yeah.
to life. Like that's such an exciting part to me because I think then that shows them how special they are, like you're so much more than just invitation boxes at some big
Hmm.
box store. Your
Yeah.
story like deserves so much more.
Yeah, big
Oh.
time. I mean, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but what like keeps you passionate about your work?
I think the idea that I get to work with different people all the time.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
I love hearing how people met, how they got engaged, how their story is, and like even for a while I was doing like a listing on Etsy
Oh,
for newspapers, like fake newspapers when people got pregnant.
oh,
And that was so much fun because as people were buying the listing, they were writing a little story about how, like, their pregnancy story. And I would sit there and just read it. And I would just like
oh,
soak it up. I'm so excited to hear how people's are celebrating love and
yeah.
how that happens for them. And because everybody's story is so different. So I think this is like learning about the way people fall in love is like keeps me excited about working in this industry.
That's huge. See, this is why people like again should get their invitation designer because just like with photography or planner, when they speak to us, they hear our passion, they hear our emotion for them. They need that same thing from their invite designer. Like I
Yeah.
can hear it from you, you know? They don't need to be going to the
I
big corporations.
yeah, no, skip those people. They don't care
Yeah,
about
get out of here.
you.
We don't want you. So, what are some exciting projects or trends you're currently working on for Queen Bean's Graphics that you would like to
Yeah,
share?
I'm currently in the process of like coming up with more designs that are ready to order.
Mm,
Just like those ideas, making it easier for people for shorter timelines, because I find like
Hmm.
that's actually happening right now is where people are getting engaged and they're not really excited about the engagement process or that planning process, so they're shortening their timeline. So I'm just trying to make things a
interesting.
little bit easier for those couples, but I am like so excited to dive into the trends that I see are happening as the new year because most people's wedding season is like starting to slow down right now, I think,
Yeah.
most vendors. And so I feel like I've had a moment to breathe. Like as I hibernate into winter, um, I'm starting to find like that creative juice is starting to flow again, and I'm really
Uh-huh.
excited about testing out some new ideas for designs and finding couples that are excited to share their story in that way. So I'm thinking like I'm just gonna start pulling out some really, really big trend ideas and start presenting them online and just like, hey, what do you guys think? So
Dang,
Fun. We'll have to keep
trends.
an eye out.
yeah.
You're gonna be making the trends, not following them. Dang. All right, that's beautiful. We love it. So we want to get into a fun game. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, it's called This or That. So pretty much we're just gonna give you
Okay.
two little questions and you just pick the answer.
Rapid
Okay.
fire.
Rapid fire. All right. All right, Jade, go for it.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
T. Rustic or elegant designs?
Ooh, elegant.
RSVP cards or online RSVP?
Online RCP.
Online RSVP. Sneakers or heels?
Sneakers.
Sneakers.
Digital printing or letterpress?
Ooh, letterpress.
Letterpress is pretty. Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Night owl.
Bold or pastel colors?
Pastel.
That's
Hey.
a hard one.
Yeah, that's kind of hard.
That was a hard one.
Here's a random one. Ride a dinosaur or befriend a robot?
Befriend a robot.
Oh yeah.
Netflix binge or read a book?
Read a book.
Okay. Here we go. Theme-based invitations or traditional designs?
Theme-based.
Uh-huh.
Hey.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Beach ceremony or vineyard wedding?
Beach.
Beach.
Spa day or outdoor adventure?
Outdoor adventure.
All right. Pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
Hey.
And DIY invitations or fully customized invitations?
Ooh, fully customized.
Yeah. That was fun. We like just doing that to get to know a little bit more about Michaelene.
Fun.
Yeah.
All right. And again, to the last question we love to ask our guests is if you could have any superpower to have while working with a couple, what would it be and how would it help you?
Okay. I had to give this one some thought. Oops, sorry. I had to give this one some thought because I feel like there's so many things that I want couples to recognize while they're going through it. So my superhero power would be the memory magnifier. And I think that's because I feel like a lot of people forget when they're going through things so quickly. They forget what it felt like or what it like that moment, which I think is so great for like why you get a videographer and why you get a photographer, so you can sort of relive those.
Yeah.
But if I could give like a superpower, I'd be like, ooh, and like this is an important moment. Slow down and don't forget it.
Hey.
Wow, that is really cool.
Yeah. That's a good one. You would just like pull it up and see it and like, boom, and then show them, hey, this is, like you mentioned, this is a great moment. Bring it into the invites. Dang, that is a good one. All right, Michaelene, where could our listeners find you?
Yeah, so sorry. You can find me on Instagram. I'm there all the time. I'm at Queen Bee Design Studio. I'm constantly talking on there and I'm answering wedding questions. So if you have any questions about invitations or just want to talk weddings and you sort of burned out your friends, like I'm here. And you can find me on my websites at queenbeegraphics.com. And then from there, you can see all the other places you can find me. But those are my two main places.
We love
Very
it.
nice.
Yeah, we love it.
We'll put all of that in the description box below too.
Oh, thanks.
And we had such a blast learning everything about you and your business. And we can't wait to see what 2025 has in store for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was so much fun being here too.
Likewise.